Hey everyone, it's Dan here. Before we get on to today's podcast, I'm excited to let you know that I've got a new book coming out. It's called Compete, Developing a Mental Playbook for Performance Under Pressure in Sport. Compete is a book for anyone who's passionate about reaching their full potential as a competitor. It's packed with my tools and techniques that I use with elite players in all sports to help them be the very best that they can be. The official release date is the 4th of May, but if you pre-order it on the publisher's website, you can receive a copy early and also get an exclusive 10% discount. To do this, visit Hawksmoor Publishing, that's HAWKSMOOR publishing.com/book/compete. Now, let's get on with the podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm joined by sports psychologist Dr. Andreas Küttel. Andreas, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's a pleasure.
Well, the pleasure is mine. We have a world champion on the Sports Psych Show, a former world champion. Now passionate about sports psychology, doing all things sports psychology. So I'm the excited one here, Andreas. You've been a world champion ski jumper. I am so excited to dive into that ski jumping, sports psychology. We're also going to be talking about a number of papers you've released around mental health and performance dynamics. Before we get on to that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, okay. I mean, I'm 46 years old. Grew up in Switzerland. Had now living in Denmark. We come to that later. I was starting with all kind of different sports, but then I was fascinated by the sport of ski jumping, which I had some kind of connection. My dad was a physical coach for this national ski jumping team, and also the training center used to be in my hometown, so I had some kind of connection there. And already when I was 12 years old, I had a jump, which was a 100 meter. That was a milestone. So I also think now that was quite crazy at this age to jump that far.
100 meters at 12 years old.
Yes, that was.
How is that even physically possible? Were you sort of highly ranked in the junior ranks at that stage?
Yeah, ski jumping is a niche sport also in Switzerland, even though it's quite popular on TV. But there's only a few ski clubs which promote that sport. So I was, I was talented. I could learn pretty fast this very technical sport. And sometimes the coaches also had to hold myself a little bit back to jump on the smaller hills before they let me go on the bigger hills, because as a young guy, you always think, the next. But you can also, of course, go to hills which are too big for you, and then you can crash, and then it can eventually also stop your career before it even started. So I was coming up in the junior ranks, and I won practically all the competitions in Switzerland because there was not too much competitions. But already around that age, 12, 13, I also went abroad to Germany, Austria, and we competed against those guys which had much better training facilities and coaching. But I could see I could match those guys. And then I somehow decided that this is the sport I'm going to concentrate on. So I early came into the actually senior national team when I was 16 years old. I was part of the senior national team. I was already on the World Cup stage, which is the highest level. I even had top 10 rankings. And yeah, when you are 16 years old and you're somehow conquering those levels, you think like, well, I have still so much potential. If I work on this and this and this, I will be unbeatable. That was my idea back then. Of course, also still going to school, I went to a normal gymnasium, which I was in a regular class, but I had a lot of options to be for competitions and training camps as long as I could keep up. So it already taught me a lot of those so-called dual career skills about prioritizing and time management and prioritizing also when I can go to a competition, when I should focus on school. So there came, of course, some hard years afterwards. It was not just going linear upwards like many young guys hope or believe. So there came a lot of bumps on the way, especially around that time, 17, 18, when I was about to finish high school, and a lot of changes in coaching. We had coaches from different countries from the former Eastern Germany or from Czech Republic. So there was also a little bit cultural clash there. They couldn't really understand why I should go to school, because they thought I should focus on the sport. Yeah, so there was a lot of years where I was actually not progressing, but because there were not too many ski jumpers in Switzerland, I still could hold my position on the team. Maybe not the first, but the second team. When I had the same level in Germany or Austria, I would be deselected. I would be out of the ranks. But in Switzerland, they somehow said, "Yeah, there's still some potential there," and I believed in that myself. So when I started studying, I started studying physical education in Switzerland, and we got a young coach who was somehow building our a young Swiss coach who was building up our vision towards the next Olympic Games, which was 2002 Salt Lake City Games, and we came there as a young team, and suddenly my teammate Simon Aman, he won both gold medals. So we came back from these 2 weeks, which were amazing. I was number six, which was a really good performance for me. And suddenly, ski jumping was from like a niche sport, it became extremely popular. And I was proud to be part of that team, still studying. Then I went to two more Olympic Games. I was not getting a medal, but I was number five and two times number six, which was very decent. And I really was, yeah, Olympic Games were just very amazing for me. And then later in my career, I had actually the biggest results. I had some lot of podium places, and also, as you mentioned in the introduction, I became world champion in 2009, which was at the end of my career. I will finish up shortly then because I'm talking a lot here. I see.
No, 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 no. But what I'd love to do is interject here because we're going to move on to, I suppose, your second
Yeah,
career.
yeah,
But I'd love to just because I could probably have a whole podcast here talking about this first career
yes,
because it absolutely fascinates me being a sports psychologist. I mean, you've said some interesting things already, and just building on this, you were 12 years old, you were jumping 100 meters. That is clearly early signs of ability. You grew up in a location where you could argue you were fortunate enough to have this opportunity. You had a parent involved in the sport, and so what was presented to you were these early opportunities. You had ability for, within the sport. Then you talked about 17, 18 years old, possibly a bit younger if I misheard you. There was some, again, in what we would say in sports psychology, some roadblocks and some speed bumps, and not everything. There was that classic non-linear progression that we all experience. Do you think that early, when you reflect back and you think about what you were experiencing from your mentality, your thoughts, emotions, feelings when you were 16, 17, 18, and things became tougher for you, did that early ability get in the way? Did it hinder you? Did it help you? How did the two interact? Those teenage years experiences with the 12-year-old
yeah.
experience.
I mean, I had really this some kind of talent stamp on my forehead, like the next kind of, yeah, big prodigy.
Ah, yeah,
And I
excellent.
also
Yeah,
felt that I was really good at learning new movements, and also I was good to, when I got feedback from my coach, to somehow translate that in my visualization and put that into action. So I was really like coordinating, and technically I was very yeah, learning well. And that was, ski jumping is not a sport where you can make 1,000 repetitions on the hill, because you can maybe only make 5 or 6 jumps in each session, because it takes time to go up again and get prepared. So you do a lot of imitation exercises, and I was really good in those so-called dry land exercises. And but for like 2 or 3 years, I couldn't really translate that onto the hill. So that was quite frustrating, because I felt, some guys are beating me, but they don't have my abilities, and I could not really show that on the hill, how good I actually could jump. There was also something with equipment, because in ski jumping, this is a big part, that you have equipment which fits to your jumping style, and you should also develop that constantly. This that the synergy is working out. But there was also time when I was in high school where I was partying. I was with my friends. I wanted to be part of that culture. So maybe I was not. I was also a typical teenager which didn't want to miss that part. And I think that was very healthy for me. That yeah, that I was having a lot of friends which were not connected to sport. I was really in love with playing basketball or street ball. Hip hop was back there was big, so we had this part was also building up my identity, but it was maybe not progressing in the way it should have been in that years.
So you were enjoying the building of multiple identities, which was healthy for you, the human side of you, but it may have slightly atrophied, it may have slightly damaged your ski jumping.
I would not say damaged. It was just a slower progression,
Okay.
and it was also a period where in '98, I thought I will be able to go to the Olympic Games in Nagano. It was there where I was finishing high school, but I was not qualified. They sent me to America to some second league competitions, and it was a non-event when we talk about transitions. Then I was in America. We were playing a lot of table tennis and dart and all kind next to the competition. But I was there thinking, is this really why I'm a ski jumper, to go on tour and have fun? No, actually, I want to be a really good ski jumper, and I invest so much, so I should also be able to show that in the competition. So not being qualified for the Olympics in '98 was for me a very important way to become more serious and say, okay, I love ski jumping. I love the lifestyle of traveling. But at the end, it's actually also to get some results, because this is also fun to jump well in the competition. So that was somehow a big moment in my career to become more serious and really yeah, to take my career more in my own hands.
And so what did the more serious Andreas look like as compared to the more relaxed or laissez-faire Andreas prior to 1998? What was the shift in behavior?
Yeah, luckily I through my studies at the university, which was PE, we had a lot of different topics. It was also about sports psychology, and my lecturer actually he became our sports psychologist of the team. So he helped me to sort out my priorities. He helped me also to balance what role am I in? Am I now the elite sport athlete when I go to training, so I can be in that kind of mindset, or am I now studying, which it is a pedagogical study, so you need to have a different attitude when you're in elite sport or when you do teacher at school, or when am I a private person? So before it was all a little bit blurry, but I became better in setting out roles. And when I went to training, then I could really like switch this to the mindset of, okay, I have only these 2 hours for the physical training. I need to get the maximum out of those 2 hours. And then I can switch again, and I can go home and study, or be with my family and not think about ski jumping all the time. So it was more like in which role I am during the day, so I can focus on different things. So it was a lot about yeah, being aware of that.
That's really interesting. So the more mature Andreas, if we want to
Yeah.
describe it like that, would be somebody who was a better focuser during practice, a sense of deliberate practice during practice and training, able to compartmentalize. So when you walked away from your practice, your training sessions, you were able to get away from jumping. Really interesting. As a sports psychologist, I'm passionate about skill acquisition, and you mentioned a couple of things there that are really interesting to me. Obviously, as a ski jumper, you can't do a lot of jumps during
No.
training, just logistically, right? And I would imagine physically as well, it's quite challenging. So, in the interesting dynamic in sports psychology and skill acquisition is we talk about the importance of fidelity of practice. We talk about the importance of high specificity, representational learning design, so that our practice looks like the game or the event itself.
Mhm.
And yet, you can't do that in ski jumping that much. So, does that mean that as a ski jumper with ambition, that you really have to train your capacity to mentally rehearse? Is it that sometimes the most successful jumpers will be the ones who can imagine better than others?
That's a very interesting question. I think visualization is somehow you grow up as a ski jumper very naturally from the very beginning because you jump, then you collect your skis, you walk up, and then the coach talks to you and they ask, how was your jump? So you somehow have to rehearse again what I was actually doing. And then he maybe gives you a correction. We already had video back in the days. It's already a long time ago, but video was there from the beginning. So sometimes we could watch our jumps and then you somehow build your external feedback which you get from the video and the coach together with your internal picture, and you try to create a new be- uh, movement pattern which you then really try to feel how it is, because when you go down, you are in golf, then I know once you swing the club, then you cannot correct anything. You need to have somehow the idea what you want to do, and then you swing it, and then you analyze it afterwards again. It's a bit the same in ski jumping, but we are somehow the ball who is flying. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
fun starts once you have the takeoff. The fun starts, but it's really ski jumping is a very it's a sport which is actually always the same. You take an in run position, you take it, make a takeoff, and you fly and you land. Everything goes straight forward. But it's anyway so complex because we come down with a high speed, around 90 kilometer per hour. You need extremely good balance. And then you have maybe point 2, point 3 to make a takeoff in the right timing. And it's a very technical exercise to jump out in a powerful, but in a way that it's aerodynamics, because when you go too steep up, then you will have a lot of drag and you will slow down and you will not jump very far. That means every training jump, you need to actually risk quite a lot to improve. You cannot just go a bit jumping or a bit training. Every jump you do is full power, and you need to always prepare for this one jump. And then when you land and when you stop, then you somehow again realize what was happening the last 15 seconds, because the receptors and the emotions or the feelings are still fresh, so it's good to collect it there, because when you go up and talk to the coach, you already have somehow interpreted in a much more intellectual way. So it's, for me, it was very good to use this maybe 5-10 seconds after the jump to really go back and feel what was happening. And often you feel the mistakes which are happening, because if you have very good jumps and everything works out fine, then you just think, okay, there was like some kind of a flow experience that was really harmonious and perfect. Yeah, so maybe there was a lot of information here again.
No, no,
Sorry.
no. I love it, and you've built some more questions in what I'd like to ask you. So basically, post jump, it's that sensorial reflection that then you've got to articulate in words to your coach. So there's a sort of the sensorial reflection is you really being in tune with your body, the actions, the movements, where you want to be in space, or was I where I wanted to be in
Yes,
space,
exactly. Yeah.
and then actually having to articulate that in words. So there's a real knowledge component there,
Mhm.
right? Because a lot of in sport we can talk about knowledge in and knowledge of, and that athletes don't always have a great knowledge of their sport, and they're just able to do. But it strikes me that ski jumping is a discipline that you've got to have a great deal of knowledge of. You've got to have a knowledge of the positions, as well as the feelings that you have to be able to execute, because you have to articulate what you've experienced. There's no question there, but feel free to respond. But my additional question there is, during the jump, you must have had technical cues. There must have been attentional cues that you've had, and if so, what were they?
Absolutely. As you say, there's a lot about, we talk a lot about feelings, because of course you can somehow measure that with angles and forces and so on. But at the end, you try to articulate your sensitory, kinesthetic feelings into words, which you then maybe talk on radio to your coach.
Yep.
And it's absolutely about understanding the sport more and more. And often when you, because you cannot have 5 key points you wanna focus. So before, when you prepare for your jump, of course you have to get ready with your equipment and so on. Also, it is on the top of the hill. You feel that you're aroused. It is really like sometimes it's also fearful to stand on top of such a huge hill when the conditions are the wind is changing very fast. It's not so much under your control. So then you can only.
You wouldn't even get me up there, Andreas.
We
Let
can
alone anything
try. We
else.
can try. Then the best is, of course, if you focus on one or two things, which can be in the in-run position. Okay, I have to focus on my knee angle that I don't push my knee too much in front before the takeoff, or yeah, of course, in the air when I'm flying, I'm trying to hold my skis a bit more together so I have a better aerodynamic position. And you can have, of course, you can have focus on one point in the position and also maybe one point in the flight because it's still a few seconds apart. You can play a bit in the air if you are flying. That is always possible, but it's difficult to focus on 3 points in in-run position because it's overwhelming. And often, the just after the takeoff, this may be half a second, 1 second just after the takeoff. This will be maybe the first 50 meter. It's hard to control things there because you're just taking off and it happens and you're already 50 meter farther out in the air, but this is
Yeah,
actually exactly the phase where the good jump is happening. Or you can, if you're not really confident, you're jumping out and you're waiting and trying to find out what's happening, then you're already one step back. So those jumpers, now this year we have Domen Preuch, which is dominating the World Cup. He won, I don't know, 15 competitions already. For him, it's very just intuitive right now how he comes from the jump to his flying position. He doesn't think, he just knows it's working out, so he let it go. And all the others maybe are just trying to find out and trying things out. But then you're not really sure if it's working out, so you're not really like free and let it go. And this is just very frustrating in ski jumping that once in a while this phase just doesn't work together. And you cannot really see it on the video. You cannot really find mistakes, but you're just jumping 10 meters shorter because it's not really working together. And this can be so frustrating in ski jumping. Yeah.
just like golf. Just
Yeah.
like golf. You know,
Okay.
one day you've got a feeling of a golf swing where you're just ripping it down the middle, and then the next day it's just the feeling's not there. You know,
Yeah.
and or it's a similar feeling, but the ball's going right or left
Yeah.
into the trees most of the time, and that's
Yeah.
where my career mainly was. Um, Look, I mean, absolutely fascinating, and I'm desperate to get on to talking about your papers, but just I suppose one or two last questions here, and please excuse this line of questioning, but I do want to ask because you know we all reflect back honestly about our careers. I mean, I think the first question is, you know, how good do you feel that you were mentally? You know, you're now a sports psych, you're involved in sports psychology, doing research. So when you reflect back, whether you want to give us on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being awesome and one being awful, I know you certainly weren't one, but how good were you mentally? What could have been even better for you mentally? And then my final question to you on top of that would be, look, Andreas, you were world champion. You were one of the best in the world. Equally, if I may ask you, you went to 3 Olympics and your best finish was fifth, which is incredible. But why not a gold medal or a podium? Was there a reason that you can pinpoint a difference there? So a two-pronged question for you, if you don't mind
Yes,
me asking
that's
those.
fine. I mean, I am around 2003 where I really made the prioritization list about what areas do make me a better ski jumper. I had technique as number one because if you have a crappy technique, you will just not fly. But number two was already mental. So it became much before physical because I was very physically, I was really good in good shape. So it's not there where I needed to invest most of my energy. It was in the mental part. So that was number two in my priority list. So that's why I worked together with my sports psychologist. I also created different mental tapes with music for the exercises for the big events. And I learned early. I learned progressive muscle relaxation or autogen training, which became a daily ritual for me. How to use also breathing in terms of my physical state and yeah. So I knew that this will give me the competitive edge, and I don't think I was a 10, but I would say maybe an 8, because I also used every physical training when we were in the gym, that was also very important to work. Weightlifting in ski jumping is not that you use so many repetitions, but you have a lot of breaks. What do you in the breaks? You lay down and you visualize. So I used really every day to become sharper on that. And maybe at the end of my career, I was a bit also trapped in all these rituals, especially in the pre-jump ritual, because I really
Okay.
made it. I used a lot of time to become very good at that, but at the end, I almost focused too much on the rituals and not so much on the jump anymore, and it was really hard to let it go. That was I was struggling a bit at the end of the career with all that checklists and this and I have to follow and that and otherwise so there was so much cognitive things going on that it was maybe paralyzed by analyzing, as you say, also in sport psychology. And luckily I was working with the ski jumping team in the Olympics, between the Olympics up to Beijing. So it was actually quite interesting to work with my own sport, but with the following jumpers. And there it was not only about performance enhancement, but as it also my philosophy, it was much more holistic support about their lifestyle, about their dual career, and so it was much more like maybe more a mentoring role than really a sports psych role.
Well, I think for the first time ever on the Sports Psych Show, we've divided a biography into two, and we're going to get on to the second part here. Absolutely fascinating stuff, and really appreciate you sharing everything you have done there with your jumping career. But like all sports careers, they come to an end, and then you've got to go off and do something else. So, what was after the ski jumping,
Yeah,
Andreas?
that was actually quite again a quite extreme transition, because just 2 months after my career end in 2011, we moved with my family to Denmark. My wife is a doctor, or still is a doctor, and she had an opportunity to make a specialization here. She was living here before, but before we moved together to Switzerland. And so I came to Denmark, not really having a network, not really having a plan what's next. I had a master degree in physical education. I had some results in sport, and my network was in Switzerland. So I didn't even know the language, so it was actually quite a big adventure. I didn't have plans to go back to university. That came a bit later. Um, and as you say, um, research is often me search. So I actually made a PhD about the transition out of elite sport, but I looked at it from an angle, more like from a sports system angle and from a cultural angle. So I compared different countries in terms of that process. That was for me really interesting. It was a paid education. I got in contact with again many very interesting individuals, but I had actually no really idea about what research is, and what about all these publication things, and all these games these games of the research, there is actually many similarities, because it's again very competitive, um, and I don't yeah that was a new whole new world for me. um, and also after my PhD, which was finished in 2017, it was not just okay. Now you have a PhD. Now you get a job at university. It was actually again quite difficult to hang on, to be involved in projects. And I was at the University of Southern Denmark in the research group of Professor Christopher Henriksen, which you also had in your podcast.
Absolutely, the great Christopher
Yeah,
Henriksen.
yeah, and you are becoming part of an environment, and the environment in Denmark is we make a lot of research about the holistic and ecological perspective about talent development and also elite sport. And I got a chance to work on a mental health project. There was some funding there, so it was somehow my way to hang on at university. I didn't consider myself like any specialist about that, but then we made a review which was about these risk and protective factors that was very well received. Um, and we also studied the mental health of Danish elite athletes. So it was more or less like a big cross-sectional design, and we sampled like 600 athletes from all kind of different sports, published some paper about that. And within like that was around 2019-20, we did that stuff, and suddenly because I wrote the review paper and because I made some studies, suddenly I was like called some kind of a mental health expert. So it is quite interesting how this can change from elite athlete to transition and athletic retirement, which was most of my studies were about that and dual career. And suddenly you dive into a new topic, and I think it was very interesting. And so I was somehow the lead researchers about this mental health studies in Denmark. We made a few um, um, studies about different sports, as I said, but then also we focused on some more qualitative stuff. And maybe this is the paper we are going to discuss now.
Well, exactly. And this is I got in contact with you because I read this paper that you co-wrote with Christopher Henriksen, also with Violetta Oblinger Peters, Robert Book Jr., and Louise Storm. And the paper is Exploring Mental Health and Performance Dynamics in Danish Elite Athletes. Insights from two case studies. And I know this comes from a cluster of papers, and I know you're going to discuss some of the other papers or introduce some of the other papers, one in particular to us as well. But I really enjoyed reading this paper, and I'd like to dive into that relationship between mental health and athletic performance. And that's really my first question for you. I mean, we've talked quite a bit about mental health on the Sports Psych show, but it's always good to get different lenses of this. So I think as a good starting point, Andreas, talk to me about that relationship between mental health and athletic performance.
Yes, I mean there is yeah, maybe somehow common sense that when you are mentally healthy and you're on top of your game, then also you're performing better. This is somehow maybe even also from my own career. I had periods where it was just everything was smooth and everything went fine. That is somehow intuitive, but yeah, we have actually not really so much evidence that this is always the case because it has been there, this idea for many years, and more we also hear, of course, examples from really famous athletes also at the Olympic Games that they are winning medals, but they're actually not in a good place because there is something else happening in their life. But because of their athletic mindset and their abilities, so they can focus very much on the competition, maybe, and still perform very well. But they're actually not really in a good place. Or we also have heard about this expression of the post Olympic blues, which is not that necessarily you're just doing very fine mentally or in mental health when you win a medal. We know that it can have all kind of different outcomes, and yeah, I think most of the athletes also after Olympic Games have to anyway find out again what they want to do and rearrange themselves a bit. So we argue in the introduction of the paper that it's just much more complex because first and foremost, athletes are persons, and you can have genetics which make you predisposed for developing a mental condition, or you can actually have a condition simultaneously over a longer period and still perform well if you get the right support. So we know from the prevalence studies that around 10 to 15% of the athletes are not thriving well, but they're still in the system, they're still competing. And as it is dynamic, it can be that in 1 year they will move up into the continuum to maybe more like from the red to more like an orange. Maybe they are not completely green. And others who are struggling slightly today, they can be in much more trouble in half a year, in 1 year. So it's not that once you are having an issue that it will be the rest of your life. And there's so much happening in the athlete's life, which we can also see in this study. So it would be just too easy to make like a linear relationship between the two things here.
I mean, you've spoken about how a little bit there about how we've tried to understand mental health. I mean, how are we, in these environments, how are we trying to measure mental health? How are we trying to understand it? How are we trying to measure mental health, within elite sport?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a question somehow what is the definition of mental health? if you want to measure
Yeah.
it. And in most of the early papers about elite sport and mental health, it was mental health in the title, but then all they talked about was depressive symptoms and anxiety symptoms. And when we surveyed these athletes in Denmark, yes, we also used some of those previously used scales somehow to compare, because often the questions are also coming like, do athletes, do they are they better or worse than the normal population? So you need to somehow have some instruments which are comparable, even though they maybe don't fit. Because, for example, an anxiety scale, which is very often used, some items ask you, do you feel exhausted, or like, do you have somehow pain in your body, or and are you not sleeping very well? But this can be total different reasons, because of a hard training, or you were just traveling, or you had jet lag or whatever. So there can be a lot of positives, false positives also there. But we also often used some well-being scales. So we had not just the mental ill continuum, but we also had the mental health continuum, which is more between flourishing and languishing. So we try to have both aspects in, but also how we see in this study, it is very individual how athletes actually understand mental health. And before you start to talk about that, you need to somehow find common ground. So in this study, we first asked the athletes, what's mental health for you? And of course, it was an interview in Danish, and there's even a bit more language difficulties, because there is something called trivsel, which is somehow maybe thriving. Then you ask, is this thriving the same as mental health? And then it was a lot of interesting discussions. But actually, before we continued with the interview, I was reading them our own definition of mental health, which we have developed based on this scoping review. And this is a very positive psychology definition. It's about, yeah, the I don't know if I should read it out, but it's
Please do. Please do.
let's see. Yeah, mental health is a dynamic state of well-being in which athletes can realize their potential, see a purpose and meaning in sport and life, experience trusting personal relationships, cope with common life stresses and specific stresses in elite sport, and are able to act autonomously according to their values. So it's it's really a long definition, but basically, dynamic state is important. It's about meaning, and not only in sport but also in life, and relationships, coping with different kind of stressors. And we also added this value thing, because we work a lot with ACT, and that you can base your lifestyle and your decisions on sound values. We thought it's very important that it's not just somebody who decides over you, but it gives you really this autonomy and this feeling of agency. So that is a definition which we presented to them before we actually went on, because then we knew we talked somehow about the same things, and they actually agreed very much with that definition.
Great definition. Really, as you say, broad and deep definition. I love broad and deep definitions, because they really make you think in detail about the specific topic area. Look, coming really into this paper, exploring mental health and performance dynamics in Danish elite athletes, and this is where you had insights from two case studies. I'd love to know more about this, the methodology, but I know you said to me off air, look, if I'm going to be able to explain this, if people are going to understand this, we need to take a step back and perhaps think about the cluster of studies and research papers that I've been doing here. So I don't know where you want to go here, Andreas. If you want to tell us, just dive into the methodology, or take a step back and tell us about, where does this paper fit in with the other papers?
Yes, as I said, the first study we made in Denmark was really like, okay, how is the situation in Denmark? If you look at across all the athletes, we had 600 athletes. It was quite still heterogeneous, because we had from junior elite athletes up to Olympic athletes, but that somehow was, we were able to sample many athletes. And then through some different statistical analysis, we found three different types. The first one was the ones who were they were doing well, flourishing, no mental issues, and high mental well-being. Then there were like, this was the biggest part, luckily. Then there were maybe one third which were doing somehow. They had some minor symptoms and also were not having the highest well-being scores. And around 10% they were like the problematic group, high symptoms of depression, high symptoms of anxiety, and pretty low mental well-being scale, well-being scores. So that was somehow the landscape. And then for the next study, we thought, okay, we would actually like to sample some of the problematic group and some of the very flourishing elite athletes to see, do they have different coping mechanisms? What do they think? Why is it that they are not flourishing or everything is fine?
Yep.
So we contacted some sports psychologists of Team Denmark, which is somehow the Olympic Federation here, to give us some hints who we could talk to. So we contacted 10 athletes, and some were like, they were some supposed to have some issues, and some are supposed to have very doing very fine. But when I got in touch with them and sent them some of the questionnaires, which before the interview, I could not see anything that some should be in this or this category. So that was actually okay. We dropped the whole somehow setup about this new study. So I just into them and I'm listening what's going on. So I met them. It was, of course, they were also briefed that it will be a quite big effort because they needed to make 2 interviews with me and they needed to make some mental health screening every second week for a period of 2 months. So it's quite a big engagement. And of course, you can also say those athletes which said yes to that, they were motivated, they were also interested, and they had also the mental capacity. So maybe I did not get those which are very red and really not doing well. So they were interested in the topic and they were ready to do that. So we made the first interview was face to face. We met and we discussed about what is mental health for you, what is special about elite sport, and also a bit about, of course, their career. They were for different sports. And then I asked them, I brought a big sheet of paper and some pencils, different colors, and asked them actually to draw their career in terms of performance development from the age where they got somehow serious about their sport. And I also asked them if you could maybe draw your mental health line, just how you subjectively perceive that. Additionally, you should maybe write down some very specific events or things that happen in your life. So they were actually on their own for maybe 15, 20 minutes. And I checked in and asked, do you need more time? No, yeah, and so on. So I came back and then they presented this drawing to me. And that was fantastic because then it was their role to explain me these ups and downs. And they said often, well, of course I knew how my career developed, but I never actually saw the mental health and the mental performance line on one paper. And here it goes up, here it goes down. And then we discussed, like, can you explain me why there was such a drop here in your mental health? What happened there? And they were often not really sure how this actually goes together. So it was really interesting to dig into these drawings they made themselves, and to really go into more exploration mode about these fluctuations and these dynamics. So that was the first part interview, and then I had more of those screenings which they made between the interviews. And in the second interview, we talked more about what was happening since the first interview. So we looked a little bit more of the short-term mental health development. And again, just in those 2 months, there was happening so many things. Some were injured, some were studying, some were going to training camps in the US. And there happens again so many things in their lives. So we talked about the long-term and the short-term development of mental health in those interviews. That was a data collection. And then based on those 7 athletes, which I interviewed twice, plus I had this somehow, objective data about their mental health screenings. In the first place, we tried to extract all kind of factors which we thought were positive or negative for mental health development. So we created a thematic map with all those different kind of factors. But presenting this in a paper, which is actually also open access, people can read that. We just felt, well, we lose first of all the story, and we don't have the dynamic part. If you have a thematic map, it's just very generic. It makes sense, but we cannot see how something developed over time. That they had really all had difficult periods at the end of their teenage years, and this is really very intuitive to see on the drawings. I mean, Dan, you read the paper, and you don't need to be rocket science to look at these drawings, and somehow you already question like what was happening there, you know. So it is a nice way to present data, and the data comes straight from the athletes. So I think that was actually good. We picked two athletes which we thought had interesting stories, and go into depth and use a lot of more quotes than we could use in the paper about the thematic analysis. So that was somehow the story of this paper. Yeah.
The relationship between mental health and sports performance. Can you give us an idea as to how that relationship played out, how it worked, what kind of, you've alluded to this already, but what kind of events impacted sports performance? Yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about the relationship. Was it consistent? Was it inconsistent? Tell
Yeah.
me a bit about that.
Well, I just maybe just talk about Peter, which is of course not his real name, but he was one guy who had like a steep progression in his early career. He was like winning everything in his junior years. His mental health was on top. Then he was also a lot of pressure was on his side, and he somehow dealt with that. He went often for parties. He also wanted to be the cool guy in school, and nobody really realized that. And he still was performing really well. So that was somehow not. He felt that he had to hide that. He didn't feel that he could talk to anyone, not even in his private environment. And his friends from school, they were also like thinking how possible that he's always partying with us, but he's still so good in sport. But that was somehow the way to escape from all this pressure. And so even though he was in a bad spot in mental health, and maybe even developing some kind of an addiction there, that he was still 2 or 3 years he was actually continuing with good results. And on the other hand, where he had a serious injury, which is of course somehow a risk factor because we know that injuries are impacting your mental state. He was
Yes,
really
massively.
in doubt, and he had luckily good therapy and treatment. But he also became again much more mature. He felt okay, if I can continue with my career, which was not sure at that time, then I will maybe really stop drinking and I will take my career in my own hands. So again, this event actually made him to become in a better mental state, and eventually also his performance went up again when he could train in a good way. So this is just again somehow a really life example from an athlete who who can show us that that it's not, if mental health goes up, performance goes up, or if performance goes down, necessarily mental health goes down. It's often again dynamic, complex, and there were a lot of life factors which had nothing to do with sport, which played in here.
What does this mean? What does this mean for coaches listening in, for competitors listening in, for, you spoke at the beginning about how you originally approached this from a systemic and a cultural perspective. Organizations listening in, there's so many key stakeholders here. Um, the body of work you've done so far, what does this mean for all of these key stakeholders in as much of a nutshell as you can give us?
Yeah, sure. Those athletes which I interviewed, they actually really emphasized that they were actually confident to talk later on in their career because of their learnings, to talk about their struggles, both with their coaches, but also in their private environment. This can be siblings, parents, a friend, not in sport. And the athletes I surveyed, they all had contact with sports psychologists. So there was actually quite a good network around where they felt confident, and also they felt supported even by their teammates in terms of injuries, for example, where other athletes were just happy to have them on their team, even though they could not train. So it was actually quite an inclusive environment here, and maybe this part of the Danish elite sports system that is really trying to be inclusive, and it's not like a huge hierarchy among the people. But of course, also you need to have some kind of organizational things in place that when athletes struggle, do they know where they can get help within the system? Um, do I get yeah? Do I get the right help from the right people, or is this not like being seen as a problem that I'm actually being vulnerable, or I'm having a rough time, which is normally lead sport life. So it should not be always seen from a pathological angle, but it's just very clear that elite sport is hard, and it's also important to see that you're not alone out there having such kind of issues. So the more the athletes actually talked about it, that they could see, oh, okay, I'm dealing with this. He is also dealing with the same. Another one deals with something else. Yeah, it's human, and it's okay to get help, not just for performance but also for the mental health.
Really interesting. So critical for organizations to create systems that provide best possible support within the resources that they've got. Critical for coaches to be open minded and have a keen eye on telltale signed behaviors factors that might demonstrate ill mental health and the relationship between and have a degree of education on the relationship between mental health and performance, and then for the athletes themselves to understand they're not alone, that the experiences they're having are commonplace, and things change over time as well. This is a dynamic landscape. Those are the kind of takeaway messages I'm hearing from you.
Yes, and as I said before, this all the athletes actually enjoyed this exercise of drawing their career, and even for a coach, it's I think it's very important just to go in such conversations to understand that where is the athlete coming from, what was happening along the road, along the way, and how they understand their journey. This is just so it was so individual how those athletes understood their mental health, and you can only find out by talking to them, and get to know their interests, get to know their struggles. And this often doesn't happen on the pitch. You need to create space for that. Yeah, this is not just happening by itself.
I know you've personally stepped into the world of teaching, but will the research landscape be there for you still? Are you going to build on this research, or are you taking a break from it for a little bit?
I was 15 years or even more in elite sport. Now I was almost 15 years in academia, and actually I thought it's actually more healthy for me to not progress a third career. So I made a new career turn again, and I just started as a teacher in school since beginning of the year, and now I'm still struggling and trying things out, and yeah, trying to be a good German and a PA teacher. And at the moment, I'm not progressing research. I think, yeah,
Okay.
things are out there and people can read it, and I hope I inspired a few out there.
It's you have it's great work. It's great work. It's absolutely fascinating, and I completely understand that career choice. PE teacher, did you say? Is it
Yeah,
was first?
and
Yeah.
German teacher. I'm have
Oh,
not
German.
I've not I'm not educated as a German teacher, but I'm German native speaker, and this is an
Of course.
advantage here in Denmark, of course. Yeah.
Fascinating. Now, look, it would be remiss of me to let you go without without talking a little bit about the Winter Olympics that have just finished. As we've said, you're a three-time Winter Olympian, and I think the hot topic, at least my perception of the hot topic within my circles, is the success of the Norwegian team. And I'm probably, possibly asking you a question here where you may not have any kind of in-depth insight, but boy, the Norwegians are successful in the Winter Olympics. Everybody's talking about their talent development pathway systems. But I'm interested to get your take again, understanding you might not have any insight, but yeah, any thoughts on what they do or what they're doing that is a little bit different to other nations?
Yeah. I have really not so much insights. I know in Lillehammer where they have a very good some kind of boarding school where athletes from different sport, cross country and also ski jumping, they live there and they train. They have pretty good facilities. They have a very good coaching education where a lot of research comes in. And yeah, of course, there's a lot of history and tradition, and also I think a lot of research in cross country where it's about not only endurance but also how you prepare your skis and so on.
Interesting.
And yeah, so this is just a big part of their national pride. um, Winter sport is
Yeah,
huge
of course.
there. So I think most of the kids just try ski jumping as a part of their school curriculum,
That
and
doesn't.
then eventually some hang on.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely not part of the English school curriculum, I can assure you. But I think as much as ski jumping scares the bejesus out of me when I watch it, and I have enormous admiration, it scares me when I watch cross country skiing. That just exhausts me just watching it.
yeah.
It's just
Maybe one remark. I mean, ski jumping, as we saw in Olympics, it's normal in big hill, and now at the end of the season, which still runs until end of March, there is some ski flying competition, and people who watch that on TV, this is double as big as this is actually pretty scary. This is an extreme sport, but it's also the best feeling you can have when you fly over 200
have you
meter.
you've done
That's
that?
really, yeah, yeah.
Oh wow.
It's, yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, Andres, thank you so much for today. Just so interesting to speak to you on both topics that we spoke about. And I know you would have tapped the interest of everybody listening in, and I know you've moved on to another career, but as you've said, those papers, many of which are free to access, you've written some great papers. So, for those who do want to find you, follow you, and potentially get in contact with relation to anything that we've spoken about today, how can they do that, please?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. This is the only social media platform I'm using. You reach me also there, Dan. So it's possible I'm checking that once in a while. Otherwise, I'm not on social media because I'm taking care of my mental health.
I don't blame you. Well, Andres, thank you so much for today.
Thank you very much, Dan. It was a pleasure. Yes.
Well, everybody, I really enjoyed that podcast episode, and I hope you did too. If you have any suggestions, please do get in touch via X or Facebook or through my website, danabrahams.com. I'd be delighted to hear any suggestions that you do have for me. I'm already looking forward to next week's episode. Bye for now.